is great to be here with you. I love coming back to Bayside. For those of you that don't know me, I live in Southern California, so I don't get here every week. And part of that is really fun because I get to see something that you don't get to see if you do come every week, and that is I get to see all this huge growth that occurs with months in between. And if you're a regular attender here, I got to tell you, you guys are doing awesome stuff. And even down in Southern California, we hear about all the great things that you're doing. And please keep it up. I think it's really, really exciting. And I'm always delighted to be here with you. And especially around this holiday season, this Christmas season. Kurt was talking about traditions. I love that word. Let me kind of hitchhike on that for a second. When my kid, with 11 grandkids, you can imagine I got plenty of kids. I have 5 kids, all adults now. But when my kids were the age of my grandkids, I heard a guy make a presentation that really impacted me. And it was all about traditions. And he said some things I've never forgotten. He said, you know, traditions are some of the most significant things you could ever pass along to the people that are important to you. I loved his little catchphrase. He said, traditions are the always statements of life, the always statements of life. And he said, there's going to come a time where if you're a parent, your kids are going to say, why do we always have to do this? We always do this on Christmas or Easter or my birthday. And they're going to be whiny about it. And his counsel was, just tell them to suck it up and go through it, because they will hopefully move through that, through God and therapy, that they will move through that and they will come to the place where they'll realize this really was a good thing because you helped me see what is really important in your life that you passed along. There is no finer season to accent traditions in a Christian home than Christmas. I mean, if I could put the 5 adult Butterworth kids on stools right here and say, talk about always statements in the Butterworth family when it comes to Christmas, they could go on for hours. My oldest is my daughter, and then I have the 4 sons. My daughter could start. We always bought our Christmas tree the day after Thanksgiving. It was tradition. I mean, now we're old, so back then there was a belief that you legally could not start celebrating Christmas until the day after Thanksgiving. Now, I live in Orange County, where you start celebrating Christmas July 5th, okay? So I understand there's been more, but back then it was, we started as soon as it was legally possible. We always bought our Christmas tree the day after Thanksgiving. My oldest son, Jesse, would say, we always bought a Christmas tree too big to fit in that Christmas tree stand. Okay? And then my next son, Jeffrey, would say, we'd always hear Dad say words he doesn't say any other time of year than when he's trying to get that Christmas tree in that Christmas tree stand. And I'm guilty as charged. My only defense is, it's tradition. So I remember so fondly some of the things when the kids were little. We would make a birthday cake and have a little birthday party for Jesus. And like I said, I had enough kids. We acted out the Christmas story. My daughter was Mary, and my oldest son was Joseph, and the youngest son was baby Jesus. And we had enough kids in between. We had like goats and camels. And I mean, we had all kinds of stuff going on there. And yet I remember when my youngest was about 6 or 7, he came to me on Christmas Eve. He said, Dad, are you going to make me get in that laundry basket again tonight? You know, I'm like hanging out on all sides. And I realized, you know, I guess even the best of traditions, sometimes you have to let them go. And that's okay. And some of us are there. We've had traditions that we've kind of let go. But there's another group that is in this room this weekend that I especially want to talk about. And those are the folks who have let go of some traditions because you're in a different spot right now than you were even 12 months ago. And December 25th is not necessarily a day you're looking forward to this year. Maybe there's a profound loss in your life that wasn't around a year ago. Maybe a broken relationship, maybe a broken heart, maybe a bad report from your medical doctor, maybe a difficult time financially, maybe you're in between jobs, maybe there's some circumstance going on in your life where you're really not into the traditions and Christmas is really kind of a difficult time for you. You're who I want to talk to most of all today, because when you think about the Christmas message, and one thing I love is the way Bayside is so committed to the Bible, that throughout these 75 Christmas services that you all are participating in, you know that Ray is going to present the true Christmas story from either Matthew's gospel or Luke's gospel. It's interesting in Luke's gospel that if you've ever actually read the whole thing, or at least started through it, you realize that the Christmas story, the story of Mary and Joseph, keeps getting interrupted by a secondary story. I mean, any story would be secondary to the birth of Jesus, right? But there is this other couple that we keep hearing about, Zechariah and Elizabeth. And of course, she's going to have a little baby who will grow up to be John the Baptist, the forerunner of Jesus, the one who would announce that Jesus is on his way. I thought it might be interesting, since I know you're going to get the Mary and Joseph story in one of the 70 services. How about if we look at the other couple in Luke chapter 1 today, Zechariah and Elizabeth? Because what we can learn through their story, I've given the metaphor, they've experienced a second wind in their life. A fresh start, a new beginning. Who in this room would not want that for Christmas and for the year that's ahead? Especially the folks who are really struggling right now. You just want a fresh start, a second wind like a runner gets it after he's hit the wall running the marathon. If you have your Bibles, I would invite you to turn to Luke chapter 1. And you can pull your outlines out as well, because I want to do the all-important fill in the blanks so that you can prove you were in church today. Luke chapter 1, like I said, there's a lot in Luke chapter 1 about Mary and Joseph, but we're going to look at the alternate story today, the B story, and it starts in verse 5, the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth. We're going to look at it in 3 separate chunks, and then I'll make the 3 big points and some subpoints, and we'll be all through, okay? Luke chapter 1, beginning in verse 5. In the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a certain priest named Zechariah of the division of Abijah, and he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. And they were both blameless in the sight of God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and requirements of the Lord. But they had no child because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both advanced in years. So those are our 2 characters, Zechariah and Elizabeth, upright, righteous people. By trade, he is a priest. But the inside story that we get is they were heartbroken because she could not conceive, and they really wanted a child. Now, we'll come back to that. Now we see a little bit of his job description. Verse 8, it came about while Zechariah was performing his priestly service before God in the appointed order of his division, according to the custom of the priestly office, he was chosen by lot to enter the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And the whole multitude of the people were in prayer outside at the hour of the incense offering. An angel of the Lord appeared to Zechariah, and standing to the right of the altar of incense. And Zechariah was troubled when he saw him, and fear gripped him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your petition has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will give him the name John. You will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth." And the angel goes on through the rest of these verses and talks about the rich ministry that John the Baptist will have in his life. And he gives all this information to Zechariah. And if you'll skip down with me to verse 18, Zechariah finally responds to this information, and he says, Zechariah said to the angel, "How shall I know this for certain? For I am an old man, and my wife is advanced in years." This is a wonderful story of second wind. And if you're ready to fill in a blank, let me give you the first one to fill in. Are you ready? God has some very strange ideas about who is qualified for a second wind. It's not always who you think it is. And I always love starting there because I have to let you know, personally, I've had some dark Christmases in my life, where there's been brokenness and brokenheartedness and nothing like any joy to the world. And when you are in that kind of broken condition, your mind does bad things for you, even to the point that you come to realize you don't even think God wants to help you out at this point. And so you feel like, well, this is a nice talk. The blonde boy's going to talk about second chances for people, but that certainly doesn't include me because I'm in such deep water that even God wouldn't bail me out at this point. Watch out. God has some very strange ideas about who is qualified for a second wind, and it may include you as well. It does. So, what we've got in this story is this. You got this wonderful couple, Zechariah and Elizabeth. He is a priest. We give that such a woo kind of thing. I mean, think of it as a job. It's a job description. And let me tell you a little bit about being a priest in first century Jerusalem, all right? You have your normal weekly, daily responsibilities, but you'll notice when we first were reading that the priests were like the military. They were divided up into divisions. There were 24 divisions of priests. And they would do their normal stuff 52 weeks out of the year, but twice a year, which corresponded with the 24 divisions, twice a year, each division was given an extra responsibility. Out of that division, one priest was chosen, and he would go into the temple where he would never be allowed to go the other 51 weeks of the year. He could go all the way into the Holy of Holies, and his job was simple. There's an incense being burnt there. He needs to make sure every morning and every evening that that fire is still lit, that that altar of incense is still functioning. He would go in and do that. He would come back out. When he would leave the temple, there would be worshipers gathered around the steps. He would basically tell them all is well. It's great. He'd kind of give a benediction, and everybody would leave, okay? Now, that sounds very routine, sounds very military with the divisions. The interesting question is, how did they choose the priest in the individual division to do that 1 week of extra special service? Because, by the way, it wasn't viewed as, oh man, I got to do extra work. This was like the week of your life. You hoped that you would be the one that would get called on to do this. How did they decide it? The text says it was done by casting lots. That's Bible talk for, hey, give me snake eyes, what do you know? Whoa! I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It was the luck of the draw. It was the roll of the dice. And Zechariah got snake eyes, and he was the guy who got to go in. He goes in and discovers there's an angel right next to the altar of incense. And the angel says, don't be afraid. I think that's always interesting, especially this time of year, Christmas season. We see angels. They're white. They're fluffy. They got wings. Woo, they just do that. Most of the time you read in the Bible, when a human has an encounter with an angel, they are freaked out. That doesn't sound very fluffy and woo, but anyway, that's another talk for another day. So the angel says, Zechariah, don't be afraid. I have great news for you. God has answered your prayer. And I'm sure Zechariah is thinking, what have we been praying for recently? This is going to be great. I bet there's going to be some really cool stuff. Your wife will become pregnant and you will have a baby boy. And I'm sure Zechariah is thinking, what? We prayed that prayer like 40 years ago. Man, you guys are really backloaded up there. If you're just getting to prayer requests from 40 years ago, this is ridiculous. And that's kind of his response. And I know I'm being a little flippant and funny about that, but there was something about the way Zechariah responded that the angel realized, you don't believe it. You don't think God could actually do it. You're not thinking clearly. I mean, one of the next fill-in that I have here, Zechariah is essentially saying, are you sure you got the right person here? I mean, are you like a week off? I bet next week the dice will bring up a young priest. And this guy, he's in childbearing, he could have a great, you're like off by a week, right? You got the wrong person here. And I know that feeling where life is kind of caving in on you and you feel like, no, God couldn't even bail me out of this one. You got the wrong person here. And then you fill in the blank for what is accurate. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too inexperienced. I'm too established in a routine to do the kind of change you want. I'm too weak. I'm too disqualified. I'm too sick. I'm too financially burdened. And yet there's such an important message that's all throughout the Bible. I chose to lift the phrase from one of the Apostle Paul's works in 1 Corinthians that says this: God is attracted to weakness. God is attracted to weakness. The phrase in chapter 1 that I have is, God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things that are strong. And what's amazing to me is, for some of us that feel like I've never been more hopeless than I am right now, in a sense, you're exactly where God can use you in the strongest way. That you, in your weakness, can say to God, here I am, do whatever you want to do in my life, but give me some hope. Give me a second chance. Give me a second wind so that I can be all that you meant me to be. So, the story goes on. Let me read the section and then I'll give you the point. We've got Zechariah saying this. Let's repeat verse 18 and we'll go from there. Zechariah said to the angel, how shall I know this for certain? For I am an old man and my wife is advanced in years. And the angel answered and said to him, I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. So behold, you shall be silent, unable to speak until the day when these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which shall be fulfilled in their proper time. Now outside, the people were waiting for Zechariah, and they were wondering at his delay in the temple. And when he came out, he was unable to speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the temple, and he kept making signs to them and remained mute. And it came about when the days of his priestly service were ended that he went back home. And after these days, Elizabeth, his wife, became pregnant, and she kept herself in seclusion for 5 months, saying, this is the way the Lord has dealt with me in the days when he looked with favor upon me to take away my disgrace among men. If point number 1 is God has some strange ideas about who's qualifying for the second wind, number 2 is an important warning. Be careful about belittling God's ideas. Be careful about belittling God's ideas. I confess, it doesn't come through in its true power in the English text, but there's clearly something about the way Zechariah answered the angel in verse 18 that the angel could conclude, he doesn't believe me. He needs some serious time to think about this because he's doubting the very power of God. I mean, this is kind of a first century version of Zechariah. Go to your room and think about what you've done. And then in 9 months, you can come out and you can tell me. But there's no talking in between. I mean, it really is. It's like, you doubt me. You're this person of no faith. I mean, the fill-in I have right under that is, I'm an old man. I mean, what you're saying doesn't happen to an old man. By the way, I can't resist, especially for all of us married couples. Notice this master husband in verse 18, where he says, I am an old man, and my wife is advanced in years. Husbands, watch and learn. It's all about the turn of the phrase, right? I mean, seriously, wouldn't you get a whole different feeling if this were to be translated? Zechariah said, well, I'm getting up there, but what about the old bag? You'd feel a lot different about this guy, wouldn't you? See, he's a good, caring husband. She is advanced in years, and I'm an old man. And Gabriel says, all right, we got to have a discipline here. You're going to be unable to speak so that you have time to think about what you've done. Now, meanwhile, remember I told you, there was always a group of worshipers that waited outside to make sure all was well. And what would happen is the priest would come out, he'd tell everybody all is well, and then he would dismiss them with what they would call a benediction. And in good Jewish form, he would quote an Old Testament passage, Numbers chapter 6, known in the world as the Aaronic blessing. In Hebrew, he would say to the folks, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift his countenance on you. And that was the code. All is well. We can be dismissed. He comes out. He can't speak. I love the way the text says it. He made signs to them. I kind of envision this as a cross between charades. Zechariah's out there. Okay, third word sounds like, mass. And then a baseball coach, third base coach, kind of stealing third. Okay, it's crazy. They're like, what's with Zechariah? He can't speak. So then the next verse says, when his priestly service was done, and that doesn't mean his entire career, that means he had finished that week of extra service. He goes back home, somehow communicates to Elizabeth what's happening, and sure enough, Elizabeth becomes pregnant. Now, what's so amazing is how Elizabeth deals with this situation. Verse 25, she says, this is the way the Lord has dealt with me in the days when he looked with favor upon me to take away my disgrace among men. Elizabeth is the contrast to Zechariah. She immediately and completely believes that God is going to perform a miracle and that this is going to happen. I chose the verse from Hebrews that many of us are familiar with, where it says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. Zechariah was the doubter. Zechariah was the one who belittled God's ideas. Zechariah was the one who felt like, you know what, God would have to be very strange in order to make this happen. But Elizabeth, she's on board right from the start. Now, I mean, we can read into this more and more. I don't want to get too crazy on this, but think of an older couple in your life. If there was an older couple and there was a pregnancy issue that might be out there, it would seem to me that if there was a quarrel over this, it would be the man that would say, oh, I believe God can do it. Buck up, old girl. This is going to be great. And it'd be the woman that's saying, that's just like you. I got to do the morning sickness. I got to carry the baby. I got to do the labor and delivery. I mean, to me, it would be more likely that the woman was the doubter and the man was this big old, it's just the opposite. Zechariah said, man, you got the wrong guy here. And whoo, boy, the woman, I don't know what we're going to. And she just said, this is exactly what God has in store for me. Now, as I said, this all weaves in between the story of Mary and Joseph. And when we come to verse 25, Zechariah and Elizabeth's story grinds to a sudden halt. And we don't pick up the story for a long time. We have to go all the way down to verse 57 before we get back to Zechariah and Elizabeth, because all those verses in between are about Mary and Joseph, okay? So, let me give you the third point, and then we'll read the story, because this is where it all comes together in this wonderful conclusion. Point number 3, even when you hit the wall, you can still experience the second wind. Even when you hit the wall, you can still experience the second wind. Let's see how it happened in the life of Zechariah. Verse 57. Now the time had come for Elizabeth to give birth, and she brought forth a son. And her neighbors and her relatives heard that the Lord had displayed his great mercy towards her, and they were rejoicing with her. And it came about on the 8th day they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to call him Zechariah after his father. And his mother answered and said, no, indeed, his name shall be John. And they said to her, well, there's no one among your relatives who is called by that name. And they made signs to his father as to what he wanted him called. And Zechariah asked for a tablet and wrote as follows, his name is John. And they were all astonished. And then the big ending here, verse 64. And at once Zechariah's mouth was opened and his tongue loosed, and he began to speak in praise of God. A 9-month hitting of the wall ends up in a second wind. Zechariah had 9 months to answer the question, if I ever get my voice back again, what's the first thing I'm going to say? Some of us are stubborn and we need more than a second chance. We need multiple chances, because as soon as we got our voice back, the first thing we'd say is, well, I'm still not really clear on this thing. I mean, honestly, just gripey, doubt. Zechariah learned his lesson. He said, this time, well, here's the fill-in. This time, we'll do it God's way. If I ever get a chance to do it again, this time we'll do it God's way. And it's so great. I love this story. So Elizabeth has the baby, and it says that it came about that all the family and friends were invited, because when you had a little boy, 8 days later, you had a big celebration where there was the circumcision, and there was also the revealing of the name of the child. And it says they assumed he was going to be called Zechariah after his father. In Jewish culture, that was a given. If you had a boy and you didn't name him after his father, then you maybe named him after his grandfather. Or maybe his father's older brother, the kid's uncle. There was always a family connection with the name because that's the way the lineage passed along. That's the legacy that was passed along. So Elizabeth says, no, indeed, his name will be John. And these people are like scratching their heads. I'm pretty good on the family tree. I know nobody in the family that's named John. Now, I know in the Bible there's no such thing as gossiping. But could you imagine a few of the people kind of circling over in the corner during this celebration? What do you think of this John thing? Yeah, it's really unusual. No John in the family. Well, I would be the last person to gossip. So let me just bring this up so we can pray about it, okay? Zechariah has been very cold and distant and aloof. I mean, he hasn't said a word to me in months. And I've watched him with Elizabeth. He doesn't talk to her either. There's friction there. There's something wrong. There's something wrong in that marriage. Baby's named by a whole nother name? I'm not saying. I'm just saying. So they said, we'll solve this once and for all. Let's go talk to Dad. And my favorite verse 62. They made signs to his father as to what he wanted him to be called. I have written in the margin of my Bible, he's mute, not deaf. Why are we signing to a guy that can hear perfectly? What do you want the baby to... You know, and I'm thinking, if I get my voice back, one of the first things I'm going to say is, I could hear everything you were saying. He's mute, not deaf. He says, bring me a tablet. Now, I'm not sure, are we talking about like a spiral notebook with a yellow number 2 pencil, or whether we're talking tablet like Fred and Barney used on the Flintstones, and used the tablet with the, Anyway, gets a tablet, and he writes down, his name is John. And they were amazed, and then the big ending, he can speak again. And he is essentially saying, this time we do it God's way. Okay? So, the next blank I want you to think of is this. God can work through you or in spite of you. God can work through you or in spite of you. Some of us that are discouraged right now, you know what? God's still at work in our lives. He's just working in spite of us. He's got good stuff ahead, and we're just kind of too, messed up in our stuff to get it at this point. All right? And to show you that, I want you to look at one kind of PS passage here. I want you to go to Luke chapter 3. Luke chapter 3, in the first couple of verses, these are the verses that most of us read through very quickly, and we pray we never have to stand up and read them out loud because we won't pronounce all these names right. So give me a little slack here as I stand up and read out loud these two verses, because there's a reason. Luke 3, 1 and 2. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, and Herod was tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother Philip was tetrarch of the region of Iturea and Trachonitis, and Lysanias was tetrarch of Abilene, in the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, the word of God came to John, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. Now, I don't know all the reasons why Luke wrote those words, but I can tell you one. All of those names that I struggled through to pronounce were the first century Jerusalem People magazine Celebrities of the World issue. Those names were the 2014 version of, and when Barack Obama was president of the United States, and Elizabeth was queen of England, and Brad Pitt was making blockbuster movies, and LeBron James couldn't count all the money he made. There was a person in the world, you. And God came and did something amazing in your life. And you think, that doesn't make any sense. He would want to use somebody big, a celebrity, someone that would have massive impact. Well, he's not against using celebrities, but remember the point we made earlier. God is attracted to weakness. And you and I in our brokenness may have our very best days ahead as God uses us, because that's how he works, in spite of us or through us. Write down these last two phrases for me, will you? Christmas is the perfect time for a second chance. Christmas is the perfect time for a second chance. You need that second wind. You need that new, fresh beginning. You got it. And then secondly, Christmas is the perfect time for a second birth. Christmas is the perfect time for a second birth. Jesus came on Christmas Day and grew up, and 30 years later, he was talking to an educator, man to man, and he said to this gentleman, don't be surprised by what I'm about to say, but you need to be born a second time. And the man said, that's impossible. It's impossible to be born physically more than once. Jesus said, you're absolutely right, because I'm not talking about a physical birth. I'm talking about a spiritual birth. And the spiritual birth, the second birth, is when you realize inside of me is nothing. I'm just hollow, hurting shell of a person. But God, Jesus, when he died on the cross that Good Friday and rose again that Easter Sunday, did it so that you and I would have the opportunity to have this spiritual birth, this second birth that would give us relationship with him and the fulfillment that we've looked for all our lives. Christmas is the time for the second wind.